up. I know we have lots of people logging on. So what we welcome to decarbonization and mobilization in the maritime sector. This is driving the transition in Chile. Now, most of you are connected from Santiago de Chile and other regions, as well as other cities. Obviously, we're very happy to have people connected from different parts of Latin America. And so we are going to be telling you what this is all about, what this dialogue is all about. Maybe those of you have checked in from other areas. I'm Karina Escobar. I am a journalist. I am the master of ceremony. I have the honor of being with you today, and I'm also a co-founder of Ambition Look. Now, as a part of the partners of Manuia and the organizers of this event, I think that now we can begin, and we are going to just give a few more minutes. The idea is to be very punctual so that the use of your time will be as efficient as possible. As I said, we are going to give you then a nice welcome, those of you who are with us from the different regions in Chile, our country, and also from different areas around the world.
Participating and would like to hear this conversation in English, there is the option of having the translation in another language. In this sense, you can go, if you don't know how to do it in Zoom, you can go to the bottom in the middle of the screen. You will see an icon that is a earth globe, and you'll see the word interpretation by it. You just need to click it in order to be able to listen to this conversation in English and the presentations too. For those that might be on a cell phone, for instance, you will see the three little points that says more. If you click there, you'll be able to find this icon. Estábamos dando también la bienvenida a quienes se unen a nosotros y no hablan español.
We're giving the welcome to those who don't speak English. You can choose Spanish if you would like. You can find that at the bottom of the screen. Maybe you're in a cell phone, you'll be able to join us anyhow. Just given the instructions of how to log on to the meeting and hear in your language of preference. As I said at the beginning, since we have a very tight agenda, we give you a nice welcome to decarbonization and mobilization in the maritime sector. This is driving the transition in Chile and in Latin America as well. That's another caveat. As I said, this is the beginning of a series of different sessions. These are virtual sessions, and some of them are going to be in person, as well as a hybrid modality. So we're going to continue to develop in the next weeks these dialogues. Now, the focus is Latin America, but we still haven't left out other countries of the world, and we want to have a global vision. The main purpose is to open a space of dialogue, but not only this, but also a collaboration and trigger action for this power transition so that we can have a decarbonization in the maritime sector. We want to gather together so that we can accelerate the efforts, so that we can accelerate these actions to have a maritime transport with net zero carbon emissions. So we are having different strategic points to work. We're going to join our efforts. We want to have concrete steps towards a sustainable maritime transport system and also have some international agreements with the IMO. But we want to have some concrete commitments, local commitments that can be achieved, and we can have tangible results. That's what we're looking for right now. We invite you then to continue listening and continue to participate. You can write your questions down in the chat. These are going to be captured. They're going to be answered as well. But once we finalize this session, we will have continuity so that we can continue with this dialogue. So therefore, I would like to introduce the starting message. Here we have the person who's in charge of transport. I'm talking about the Minister of Transport, Juan Carlos Muñoz. For those of you who don't know him, Those of you who are not from Chile, he's a civil engineer from the Catholic University. He's a doctor in engineering and transport from the University of California in Berkeley. And he was also a researcher in sustainable mobilization, urban planning, and efficiencies in transport systems. He's recognized for his contribution on innovative public policies, as well as training new professionals in this field. And so we have him with us today. He is going to share the Chilean government's vision. Minister, we leave the mic to you. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, we can. Thank you so much. Hello to everyone. Thanks to all participants. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers of this event. Thanks for your collaboration, especially in this issue that's so important. It's an honor for me to just open up this seminar with this inaugural address. Now, we need to reflect on how we can accelerate decarbonization in the maritime sector. This is a sector that's crucial for Chile's economy and for many port cities and countries. With the 6,000 kilometers of coast, we are a country that really has to focus on these issues. We have a large effort to strengthen this issue. Now, for administration, it's very important to have the participation of many stakeholders in events such as this. We need to advance towards decarbonization, and we want to really participate, such as today. Decarbonization is very concrete. Our policy is very concrete. More than ever, we need to mobilize all our efforts so that we can prioritize this energy transition, so that we can reach our neutral targets, carbon neutral targets. And in Chile, our objectives are basically, these are policies that really transcend many governments. We have our objectives and we need to have continuity in these objectives. We need to have an action plan so that we can attain these good results. And so that's what we have been working on during this administration. And of course, we have a responsibility, a larger responsibility in leading this transformation because it involves different areas in our society and in the maritime and port sector, it's key. Now, in the maritime sector, is fundamental in how our country opens up economically to the rest of the world. Now, if we look at the year 2024, now exports in 96.5% of exports were through maritime systems, and almost all our copper and our forestry products, salmon, agricultural products, they leave through the maritime pathway, and more than 80% of that tonnage is also through this maritime pathway. So this speaks of the importance of having a very good logistic, a logistic that is efficient, a good capacity that will allow for these exports will occur in an efficient manner. Now, this maritime transport has the importance. Well, if we look at cost per kilotons, kilometers, and emissions opportunities, now this is a transport that is convenient and economic. That's why we're very happy that maritime transportation plays such an important role for us. Now, we have a series of measures that what we're looking for is to strengthen the development of these port systems so that we can continue to drive economic growth in Chile. We understand that in ports we have critical infrastructure for trade and also for the connectivity in our regions. In order to attain all of this, we have mobilized with different projects and some large-scale projects. For example, the new port in San Antonio that we have been working under with the San Antonio port for that expansion. This is an infrastructure that will allow to just update to improve this infrastructure so that we can assure national inputs for the next decades, because we know that this type of infrastructure takes a lot of time in order to be built. That's why we also have to look decades in advance. So our future estimations for demands lets us understand that this port is relevant and necessary, and that's why we are really happy to have seen in these last few weeks seen the companies that qualified in the bidding uh, process in order to work on this project. It's around 1,500,000 dollars investment, and we have a 2.5 billion for these terminals that are going to be in the earth and sea facilities, and we are going to be building these terminals so that we can have all the equipment that's necessary for these activities. This is going to be the first semi-automatic terminal in the country, and we're also going to have a terminal that's zero emissions with carbon neutral systems as well as electric systems that are carbon neutral. We're also going to have a efficiency with our sustainability plan. So there's going to have to be explicit plans that show a reduction of emissions for the operations of both terminals. Together with that, and also to improve the load that arrives and the cargo that arrives in San Antonio, we're also working on a railway that goes from the port towards the outskirts of Santiago. This is a track that will allow us to move in many kilometers. We're also thinking of double stacking type of conveyance. So we need to strengthen not only the port infrastructure, but also the inland infrastructure. And so we are going to prepare the port. This will allow us to increase the current capacity of containers and increase that capacity in 5 times. Right now, we have 50,000 containers per year. We will have to move 250,000 containers per year. And that is a huge increase. That's why we need to integrate the arrival of a cargo through these railways. This way, we can optimize the port spaces, which are key for the development of these maritime activities. There's other initiatives that we're working on, like, for example, the expansion of the San Vicente and Valparaiso port, and also the port in Magallanes, Bardones, and Laredo. We will see this later. This is fundamental for green hydrogen, and this is going to be a fundamental. We have to look towards the future. We have to look at that decarbonization for the maritime sector. We also have to look at green energy. This is an opportunity for us to reduce our emissions. Now, Chile is proud of its participation and of working with the different opportunities that we have in our country. This is for the production of green hydrogen, as well as looking at the economic benefits that our country will have. This will be a new energy bridge that will allow us to reach the objectives of our commission and organization. And also, from the ministry, we have been working on a new law that allows us to have a better logistics systems in ports. It's important to also note that we're a region that has a great potential when we talk about the future of renewable energy. Taking charge of that potential means that we will have a higher economic development as well as better investment. So we have mobilized ourselves so that we can advance in this task, in these areas. I also want to highlight the leadership role that Chile has had. We have worked together with other countries, lead the negotiations, the search of new agreements within the International Maritime Organization, the IMO. It's fundamental to convoke more stakeholders, and we've also used this space that we've gained through the presidency of the International Transport Forum that gathers countries from the OECD. And we have had that presidency, and from that presidency, we were able to have a calling to all the countries that are members of the IMO so that we can really work on our objectives. We hope that this will be captured in the Maritime Committee that will be taking place in October. And so we want to advance for a gradual reduction of emissions, starting in 4% in 2028 up until more until reaching our target in 2040. We also have to have the applications of the purchase of units. This is an economic incentive so that we can reduce the carbon footprint. We know, of course, that this is going to be a big challenge. It won't be easy to implement. This is a challenge that's very real, that we need to have important investments with the use of these new technologies, and just like driving more innovation, research, and it also requires a careful planning. So we have to also understand what is the impact to others. Like, for example, the countries that are in the just the farther points of the world, like Chile, for example, exports have to travel more kilometers, more tons per kilometer. That it means that it also impacts. So we have to make sure that we have a even playing field so that we can really address a global challenge that's common for all of us, and that's decarbonization. We are convinced that this is fundamental and necessary objective. This has to be compatible with the demands that we have globally. Now, from the ministry, we hope that the drive from these initiatives will allow us to also promote the demand of alternative fuels, just reinforcing this growth in this industry. We have to look at green hydrogen, as I said beforehand. We are looking at a wonderful opportunity so that we can make sure that happens. We are hopeful with this new power industry. We want to be the main suppliers of this green energy. We see the possibilities that we have as a country. Now, this energy is going to grow from year to year, as well as those innovation projects that are related to that. In order to meet our objectives, we have worked in order to generate the infrastructure. It's going to be essential in order to meet our plan, together with ENAP, as I said, as well as our logistic development plan, Magallanes. We're also looking at how to strengthen this infrastructure. We're also working on the reinforcement of existing facilities, and then also new docking facilities in Tierra del Fuego in the south of Chile. We are working in a fluid manner, and we're also showing that this is compatible by working at night so that we won't generate any impact during day activities. Sometimes we need to move from one ship to another, as well as to a truck. There's lots of activities that take place. We're also working at an access bridge and different spaces for the stacking of this oversized cargo that we need to manage. So all of these aspects are being reviewed. We also have strategic alliances with the private world for the development of some pilots for the transport that just has a source green hydrogen. So this is a huge effort. We're looking at the potential that Chile has, just reinforcing the position that we have, not only for wind energy, as also the solar energy, solar power. We have solar power in the north of Chile, as well as wind energy in the south. So we're driving all of this. We want to advance. We are decided to do so. We want to have a wonderful integration with the maritime sector. We need to assure sustainability that's social, environmental for this industry. We want to have Chile as an example for the sustainable development. We want to assure that is possible. Now, we would like to thank this space, and we hope that this will be a very successful seminar. Thank you so much. Very interesting, the vision that you have from Chile towards the region, as well as all the commitments that are required by our country. We want to continue now.
And we would like to welcome Joaquín Rosas, who is the Manager of Policy for Climate-Aligned Industries at Rocky Mountain Institute. The RMI, for those who don't know, this is an international organization which is known by accelerating the decarbonization of the sea shipping industry globally. He will be sharing with us the views of the RMI regarding the organization's negotiation process with the IMO, the International Maritime Organization. We will hear about the next steps in this process towards a greener maritime shipping industry. So, Joaquín, the floor is yours. Thank you, Carolina, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon. I'm Joaquín Rosas. I am the manager for international policies at RMI in the United States. It is an honor for me to be attending this seminar and being one of the speakers at this seminar to show the development of Chile in this realm of the shipping decarbonization process. I'd like to share with you a summary and talk about the importance of the negotiations taking place nowadays at the IMO regarding sea transportation. I'd like to explain the framework of net zero emissions, the compliance mechanisms, the windows of opportunities that there could be for Chile as a major international actor in this area. And as the minister said, the IMO is in charge of regulating the international maritime shipments, which rules over at least 80% of the international maritime or sea shipments, not just for large fleet countries, but also for many countries which depend upon the maritime shipping industry, such as Chile and many others. So way and beyond the technicalities of this framework, this is a very important economic and political framework, which is also strategic, which provides competitiveness and strategic or tactical work for the different countries. We will be sharing the presentation later on, but you can also ask your questions if you want through the chat, and you will be receiving the answers to those questions later on when the information is shared. Let me just give you a little bit of context about this nonprofit independent organization that has been working in energy transformation globally. It is based in the United States. However, we're also present in other countries such as India, China, and the Caribbean. The main mission is to transform the energy grid to assure a clean, prosperous, and free of carbon future. Next slide, please. The RMI is also driving the decarbonization in key areas at a large scale by using the market catalysts today existing in the country, in the different countries or markets globally. The RMI team, the marine shipment team at the RMI, is in charge of driving the decarbonization of the industry based on market interventions. So basically, there are projects that are associated to the IMO projects where we develop technical and economic analysis to provide support to the industry. We also work with international delegations from the IMO, where we share the information of the work that has been done within the framework of net zero as defined by the IMO in this process of maritime shipping decarbonization. Next slide, please. I'd like to start now with my presentation. In 2023, the IMO has started this strategy to decrease the GHG gases. The objective is to accomplish zero net emissions by 2050 in maritime shipments. We have set forth checkpoints, which is basically the 20 to 30% reduction by 2030, 70 to 80% by 2040, in comparison to the levels of 2008. So the IMO also establishes that at least 5 to 10% of the energy used by the maritime sector should come from net zero or almost zero emissions. This is based on a very strong commitment by the IMO, which is that there should be an equitable and fair transition to strengthen the capabilities of the different markets, also to foster technology transfer for the developing countries and also for the workers who work in this industry. After approving the strategy back in 2023, the member states from the IMO plus the key actors have been negotiating the different mechanisms to make this transition possible. In April 2025, there was an approval of the zero net framework by the IMO. There is a design which offers a way to implementing this strategy, which will be subject to the formal approval in October 2025. The strategy must be understood as a competitiveness signal where the markets will have to privilege logistics chains with a lower carbon footprint. There is also preparation at the port facilities. This will become a critical element and critical actors also in this strategy. Now, the core of this strategy is a fuel standard, which is divided into two levels. Level 2, which is the baseline objective, which sets forth a minimum with penalties, elevated penalties in case this limit is not respected. There is a penalty of around $380 per ton of CO2 equivalent. Second level is the direct objective. This is level 1, which establishes a stricter threshold with lower penalties, though, for those who are willing to stay in this level and below this yellow line, where the penalty is equal to $100 per ton of CO2 equivalent. The vessels below this level will generate surpluses or credits that may be also traded in the market, may be sold to other operators which are beyond or above level 2. The resources paid because of non-compliances to the level 1 and level 2 units will be accrued in a net zero fund, which is held by the IMO. This is a very, it's a pretty transformational process, the architecture, I mean, because it changes the way we're thinking, it changes the mindset. It's a different type of administration of these funds, which will be devoted to helping the reduction of emissions as the definition was made by the IMO. This two-level system also is supported by another strategy, and this is quite interesting. The IMO has incorporated a financing system, a funding system for zero to almost zero, quasi-zero emissions. This is a way in which the IMO believes they can foster decarbonization. If a vessel is capable of staying below the threshold of zero emissions, which is 19 grams of CO2 between years 28 and 35, they can go below this limit to maybe 14 grams of CO2, they will have access to this incentive, to this financing fund, which is managed by the IMO. It's really important to explain that this threshold is the only threshold so far established by the IMO. And so the access is open to every country who is willing to participate. Of course, we are waiting for future guidelines issued by the IMO after the extraordinary session to be held in London in October this year. And so this adds up to the many benefits that may be generated after the sales of these surplus units. What else? Can we go back to the previous slide? What are the incentives behind this? Firstly, to cut down the costs associated to both fuel and emissions. There's fuels such as green ammonia or methanol, which are part of the incentive. We want to shorten down the gap between these fuels and the conventional fuels. You see that the costs of these fuels are very high, and the IMO is, by doing this, is fostering, incentivizing the industry to using these greener fuels. There will be a record kept of the compliances and non-compliances of level 2 and level 1 thresholds. The vessels which do not meet or comply with these objectives will help finance the incentive fund for those vessels that are actually willing to adopt the zero-emission fuels. Next, please. As it was mentioned before, in the framework of the IMO, there is a second pathway with intermediate milestones, like reaching the 5 to 10% reduction or the usage of zero-emission fuels by 2030. This is an important point. It's a turning point where it could trigger an accelerated option or an accelerated reduction from there then onwards. Between year 30 and 40, these zero-emission fuels may account for over 60% of the power used to move the maritime industry globally. According to the studies today, the current forecasts are still showing an important gap between what is needed and what we have today. There are different forecasts which also state that with the current projects and being able to produce these fuels would not be enough to accomplish said targets. However, this is also an opportunity for the pioneer companies who may be willing to developing these fuels, greener fuels, and also have long-term contracts with the shipping companies. This is also part of the incentive that the IMO has created. At an entrepreneurial level, this will change the paradigm. It will shift the paradigm. This will help the companies organize their shipping portfolios for the supply of goods according to the IMO governance, and also commercial strategies will be developed for those already existing companies which participate in tendering processes, including the ports. The ports will also have training and information regarding the new permitting process, plus the protocols required to adopting these new fuels. We have heard much about the green ammonia as one of the future fuels to be used in the maritime shipping industry. We have performed some analysis so far to see what the impact could be in the economy, the impact of these new fuels, with the purpose of understanding how competitiveness may be triggered among the different actors in the industry and how this may affect the other traditional fuels. Just to give you a little context, this is including the total cost of ownership of a vessel. Below this framework, the gap could be reduced substantially throughout the life of these vessels. It is also important to add that the methodology not just includes fuel, but also the capital investment in these new technologies, insurance, manpower, maintenance, and port costs associated to the operations of these vessels. If we compare conventional ships, the costs should rise because new compensation units should be purchased to IMO in order to stay within the regulatory range. Otherwise, if the emissions continue to rise, they will not be compliant and then will be forced to purchasing compensation units or credits. In contrast, the ships which today operate with green methanol would be facing a different situation. Currently, as I have mentioned, the cost gap compared to conventional fuels is big, is significant, which allows the competitiveness of the fuels in the sector. However, according to the IMO's framework, this gap may be reduced. And there are three variables which are important. Firstly, the revenues for the selling of the surpluses of the compliant companies, the incentive received by the IMO, and clearly the savings of not having to pay penalties because of using traditional fuels. Those three are the main elements to highlight. This should create a good economic balance and improve the competitive position of zero-emission fuels. This should also drive forward the investment will among the different agents in the market.
Disculpen, ahí sí.
Apologies for that.
Uno de los puntos más emblemáticos y también
Another
muy discutidos durante la
emblematic
aprobación del
topic,
marco
which
y en las
was
negociaciones
likely
del
discussed
marco de
during
la
the
OMI
approval
fue
of the
básicamente
IMO's
cuánto
framework,
podría aumentar el
was
costo de las
how
importaciones y las
much
exportaciones
higher could
al
be
usar
the
combustibles de segunda
imports
emisión.
and exports
En RMI
cost
hemos
because
utilizado
of
análisis
using
preliminares
these new
tomando
fuels.
como
We
base de
have
datos
performed some preliminary
información de los corredores
analysis
verdes en
using
los que
all the
estamos trabajando,
information coming from the
donde
green
básicamente los
brokers,
resultados muestran
and the
que aunque
results
los
are
costos
here.
de operación con metanol verde son más altos,
Green
especialmente ahora
methanol
en el corto
costs
plazo,
are higher,
en
especially in the
comparación con
short
los otros
term, and will
combustibles
stay
convencionales, el
higher in
impacto
the
en el
short
coste
term
final
compared to
de
traditional
bienes de
ones. They
consumo sería
impact
mínimo.
the
A modo
the
ilustrativo, por
cost
ejemplo,
of the final
en
goods, but
productos de
that
ropa, el
impact
costo de
should be
envío por
minimal,
ítem aumentaría
such as
solo un punto diez por
sending
ciento
a
cuando se cambia
wardrobe
de un
would only increase
combustible
by
convencional
10%
a
by
uno de
shifting
metanol
from
verde.
conventional
En el caso
fuels
del
to green
diferente tipo de
methanol.
muebles, el
In the
incremento
case of
sería menos del
furniture, the
1%.
increase would be of less than
Y esto
1%.
básicamente ocurre que al
And
distribuir el
this
costo del
basically
combustible
happens
entre el gran
because
número de
by
ítems transportados en un contenedor, el impacto
distributing the
unitario es
cost
marginal.
of these
Entonces,
products
básicamente,
inside
los
a
análisis preliminares
container,
muestran que
the
el
cost
consumidor
increase
final
is
no
marginal,
vería
and the
grandes
final consumer
diferencias
would
de lo
not
que ya
see
o los costos
many
asociados de lo
differences
que está
between these
pasando hoy en
costs
día. Y
and
esto
the
este
costs they
resultado
pay today.
es fundamental un
So
poco para
this
el
is
debate
basically the
político y
result, which
empresarial
is
también, porque
important
básicamente
to
muestra
be
que
addressed by
en algún
the
sentido la decarbonización
policymakers.
del transporte
The
marítimo no tiene por
decarbonization
qué
of the
traducirse
maritime
necesariamente en un
shipping
aumento
industry should
sustancial
not
del precio de
necessarily
algunos bienes de
into an
consumo, lo que
increase
también
of
eventualmente fortalece el
the
caso
price of
para
goods.
una
This
adopción temprana de los
strengthens this
combustibles de segunda
business
emisión.
case, the business case of zero
Siguiente
emission
slide. Un
fuels.
poco
On
explicando,
the next slide, we can
vamos a la
see,
siguiente
if we can
diapositiva.
take
Sí,
a look at the next slide, we
el
can
marco aún está
see
en desarrollo,
that
¿cierto?
this
Y
framework
las
is
directrices
still under
finales serán determinadas
development,
para
and the
establecer
final
cuán
guidelines will
competitivos sean
be
estos
determined
combustibles.
and will decide
Hemos
how
identificado
competitive these fuels
cuatro
will
variables
become.
muy
We have
importantes que creemos que
identified
van a jugar un
4
rol
important
importante en la
variables that we
determinación
believe will play a
de este
major role
marco.
in the
Les voy a
incorporation of
explicar
this new
muy
framework.
a
I'd like to
grosso
explain to
modo un poco
you
cuáles son
the
estas
main variables at a
variables.
very high
Primero, el precio de
level.
las unidades de
Firstly,
excedente.
the
Básicamente van a
price of
ser
the
unidades que
surplus
se van a
units.
vender
These units
y
will be sold
no
in the
está claro
market,
cómo
and
la
it
OMI
is
va a
not
definir
very
reglas
clear
o
yet
si va a
how
colocar
the
alguna
rules of the
limitación en
game
el
will
precio o
be
cómo se puedan
as
vender
set
estas
forth by
unidades,
the IMO, or how
¿cierto?
the pricing
Segundo,
will
no está
also be.
claro cómo se va a calcular este
We
incentivo
don't know
hacia
yet
combustibles
how
de cero
the
emisiones, ni
incentive
tampoco cómo ese
towards
cálculo
zero
se va a
emissions will
llevar
be
en el
calculated
tiempo.
and how the
Un poco el
calculation will
objetivo de
be
este
maintained throughout
incentivo es
time.
disminuir
The
la brecha con
objective
combustibles
is to
convencionales.
reduce the
Bueno, la
gap
pregunta aparece, ¿qué
between
pasa cuando
conventional
esa
fuel
brecha de
prices
costos
and these
disminuye?
new
¿El
fuels.
incentivo también
If there is a
disminuye o no?
smaller gap, the
Y
incentive maybe
finalmente,
will also
básicamente,
decrease.
las
We don't
directrices
know
de análisis del
yet.
ciclo de las emisiones de
Also,
los combustibles, cuáles van a ser los
there are
valores que
certain
la OMI
elements
va a
related to
determinar
the
para los
new
combustibles
fuels
que se verían
cycles,
usados dentro del
and
el
the
marco,
IMO
¿cierto?
will
Y un punto
determine
muy
that.
importante
A
acá
very
también es cómo
important
la OMI
element is
va a
also
trabajar
how
el
the
hecho de
IMO
cómo va a
will
trabajar o tratar las fugas de
will
metano y
try
eso va a generar,
will
va a ser un punto
address
muy
the
importante
leak
específicamente
of
para
methane.
combustibles como el gas natural
This is
licuado y
very
los
critical
combustibles
when it comes
azules
to liquid
utilizan captura de carbono para mejor ayudar
gas,
a disminuir
and
sus emisiones.
this was also related to
¿Cuáles
the
son las
emissions
fechas
of
importantes que se
carbon.
vienen
What are
ahora?
the
Como dije
main
anteriormente, en
dates? Let's take a
octubre,
look at the main
mediados de
dates.
octubre, se viene la votación de la OMI en
Here we
Londres,
have the
la sesión
dates. Here we
extraordinaria,
have that
en donde los
extraordinary
estados
session
van a
in
votar
London,
la adopción
and where
formal del
there's going to be a
marco de
voting
cero neto,
of
¿cierto? Este es un
this
hito
framework.
político
Now,
muy
this is a
importante
political milestone
porque
that's
define
very
si el
irrelevant
marco
because we defined whether this framework is
sigue su
going to
curso o
continue
no.
its path or not.
Si el marco es
Now,
adoptado en esa
if that
fecha, en
framework is
octubre de este
adopted
año,
in October of this
comienza
year,
a correr la
then we will
línea de tiempo
begin
hasta
to
principios de
run
2028,
that
donde
timeline up
básicamente la
until
OMI va a
2028,
desarrollar
where
las
the IMO is
directrices,
going to develop
donde se van a
all of
definir
the
muchas de las
guidelines, where we're going
variables
to define all of these
que hablé
variables
anteriormente,
that I
un
spoke
poco que
of
van a
beforehand.
complementar
And they're also
la
going to
operabilidad de
supplement the
este marco de la
operability
OMI, ¿cierto?
of this
Donde
IMO
básicamente después
framework.
de que esas
Now,
directrices estén
after
listas,
those
a partir
guidelines
de
are finished,
2028,
and
el
starting
marco entraría en
2028,
vigor con las
the
directrices totalmente
framework
aprobadas,
would be running after the
en donde los
criteria is
buques ya deberían
approved,
cumplir con
where
los
the
límites
ships
de
should
intensidad
already
de
compliant
emisiones, un
with
poco
the
ahora que
emissions
ya
limit,
se regularizaron
or
por el tema
they should be
de la legislación
regularized, and they can also be penalized if not. And we need, then at the end of 2030, then we will have that first review of that framework, and we will also review how this payment of the different shipments is going to continue, the percentage of the zero emissions fuels, if they are complying, and if they are following that fuel matrix of that sector. And if we move on to the last slide or next slide. Now, just as a general overview, I understand that we're also continue to talk about this in our other dialogues. What does that mean for Chile? Now, how do we ground this at the national level? In first place, this is a great opportunity to attract investments. And just like the minister said, thanks to the potential of Chile with its renewable energy, Chile could be a center of the supply of this green energy, especially for the international maritime sector. Secondly, we also will have more employment. Now, not only will we produce a green hydrogen, we also have to go beyond that. We also have to have a green ammonia that is also more specialized. And so, thirdly, Chile can also increase its economic benefit. I understand that Chile is really working on a pre-feasibility phase, a pre-feasibility study for low emissions. And so what's also important is the incentive to have an early participation in these markets. This could also support and help Chile to develop industrial and technological centers by fostering innovation productivity, as well as the development of new value chains. Before I wrap up, I would like to just highlight that Chile doesn't have a strategy of just complying with what is being agreed on in the IMO at the global level, but this represents a way of having a strategic advantage in order to transform its leadership in renewable energy. This will be a global effort, and we want to differentiate ourselves in the international market. That's what I have for now. It's a bit long. So if you have any questions, you can send me an email, you can write a chat or send it to the coordinating team. And thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Joaquín. Very interesting presentation. So many concepts that not only favor Chile, but also the world. And we also are looking at other aspects. So we need to work together. We also need to work on regulations. And sometimes, that could have some impacts that are more difficult. Now, as Joaquín said, many questions have come up in the chat. These presentations are going to be shared by email, and any questions that do arise, please take advantage of this wonderful instance, these great speakers that we're having right now to write down your questions. Now we want to continue with this program. We have seen the minister's vision at the regional and global level, national level. Joaquín was with us from Houston in the US, and we want to continue to travel throughout Chile, and we're going to the south, to the river and lake region. For those of you who don't know, this is to the south. Chile is a very long, narrow country, and we want to contact now Joel Pérez. He is an academic and researcher from the Universidad Austral and the director of the Maritime Machinery Lab in DEMS. And he is going to talk about the status of the fleet, the use of alternative fuel that was presented by Joaquín, electrification, as well as the green corridor development that Joaquín also mentioned. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? This is Joel Pérez on the mic.
Recién te veíamos compartiendo la presentación.
¿Sí?
Sí, ahí está.
¿Estamos? Súper perfecto. Ya, pues bueno, Para poder hablar de transición energética
Okay, to
tanto
talk about
como
power transition
desde desde el punto de vista de la academia, ¿cierto? Necesito
from the academic
presentar primero
standpoint,
cómo
I still
nosotros hemos
I
llegado
need
a este
to
punto
first
antes de
present
saber
how we have
qué es
reached
lo que
this
tiene
point
Chile de la
to really
flota
understand what
nacional
Chile has with its national fleet,
y poder, ¿cierto?
and we need to be able
Lograr una opinión bien precisa, clara respecto
to
a
have a better
cómo estamos
understanding
y cómo podemos llegar
of where we
a ese
are
2050 con
and
una
how what we could
transición
reach
energética.
2050 with a maritime decarbonization.
Un par de puntos que voy a
Now,
tocar
a few
en área
points
de
that I'm going to
introducción, el
highlight. I
estado
will
del
have
flota,
an
bueno, como
introduction to
estado,
the
la
status of the
estructura,
national
cabotaje,
fleet
la
and
transición
this
energética del
is
transporte marítimo
the
nacional, considerando los combustibles
the fleet
fósiles
that we
para
have.
el
Also, we have
mundo
the
y
energy
combustibles cero
transition
o baja huella de carbono
as well
y la
as our
electrificación.
carbon footprint
Cómo
and
podemos
decarbonization
integrar
and
la
all of these
electrificación
aspects,
en
and how we
desarrollo y
can
cuáles son
also
los
integrate
desafíos, cuáles son los retos que
investigation. What are
deberíamos
our
enfrentar
challenges
en este periodo antes de
that we
llegar
will
al
have
2050.
in this period
Por
before
último,
reaching
colocar
2050?
de la agricultura
Now,
como un
here,
ejemplo claro
the
de
Proyecto Corredor
proceso
Verde.
de transición energética
This is
en
the
el que
Green
estamos
Corridor
trabajando
Project in
desde
aquaculture. This is something
digamos,
that we have been working on for quite some
En,
time.
como una breve introducción, bueno,
Now,
desde
as
Austral,
a
del área de ciencias
introduction
marinas y eficiencia energética, hemos
from
estado
the
trabajando
Universidad
en
Austral, we have been
descarbonización
working on
del
the
transporte marítimo desde el
decarbonization of maritime
2019,
transport since 2019,
con cuatro líneas de
and with
investigación
four
bien
different
marcadas.
research
La
lines that
primera, que
have
es el
been
uso de
very
energía, ¿ya? La
distinguished.
segunda, que es el uso
We
de
have the
electricidad, la
maritime
electrificación marítima,
electromobility, also
el
green
desarrollo de corredores verdes y
hydrogen,
por
the
último,
development of green
de la
corridors, as well
implementación
as the
o
implementation
con combustible con
with
baja huella de carbono, ¿ya?
low
Y cero
carbon
huella de
footprint
carbono.
fuels.
Y bueno, aquí dice 2019, pero en realidad
And so here it
partimos
says
un par de
2019.
años antes.
Now here we
Ahora
started a few
se ve
years
que ya logramos
before.
concretar varios
We have
de
been able
proyectos
to
donde
have
logramos
lots of
tener
programs and
laboratorio
projects
apto para
in
poder
a lab
evaluar las tecnologías que nos van a
that can
permitir
evaluate the
transicionar
technologies that will
energéticamente
help
al
us with this
2050.
transition up until 2050.
Partiendo con el estado de la flota nacional, entonces, primero, en el mundo, más
Now,
de
first in the world,
14.000 buques
here
más
we can
grandes,
see
es decir, de los mayores
114,000
de
ships.
más de 5.000 AV.
Here
El
we can
consumo de combustibles
see
fósiles, ustedes ya lo
the
saben, el
consumption of
cobre
fossil
y los combustibles
fuels,
con baja huella
IFO,
de azufre, bajo contenido
as
de
well
azufre,
as
¿ya? Y
those that have
también todos
low
estos
sulfur
combustibles con bajo
content.
contenido de carbono, como el
And
LNG,
here
el
we can
LPG,
see just
metanol, etanol, los biocombustibles, y ya hay
methanol,
proyectos de
ethanol,
embarcaciones consumiendo estos
and different types
combustibles
of a
con
fuel.
cero
We
huella de
can
carbono,
see
como
this
el
alternate
amoníaco y el
fuels,
hidrógeno, y por supuesto las embarcaciones
and we can
eléctricas.
see the electric ships as well.
Eso, bueno, en Chile la
Now,
flota
here in Chile,
total son
the
más de
total
88.000
fleet
embarcaciones,
is
pero
over
de esas 88.000,
88,000.
solamente
Out of
270
those,
entran
only
en el rango de
270
buques
enter
mercantes,
in
¿ya?
this
Menos de,
merchant
muy,
fleet.
muy bajo el porcentaje,
It's a
¿cierto? Pero
very low percentage.
significativo en términos de la cantidad de
If
carga
we
que
look at the
se
quantity of a load
comercializa
or cargo that is
desde Chile
commercialized from
hacia Chile.
Chile.
Em, este tipo de embarcaciones cuentan con
Now,
sistemas de
this
mitigación de
type
emisiones, scrubbers, SCR
of a
y algunas,
fleet,
algunas
they have
embarcaciones con
scrubbers
propulsión
and
híbrida,
SCR,
¿ya? La IMO, bueno, yo agradezco a
and the
Joaquín y al equipo porque
IMO.
me hicieron la pega de hablar de la
They really
normativa, porque
worked,
algo que es
hard in
etcétera,
really
va detrás de
disseminating
todo
or
lo que es
communicating the
unanimidad en la
new
perspectiva
regulations.
de esta transición energética que nosotros
They have
estamos
been really focused on this
desarrollando
transition,
desde acá en la universidad.
and we have been really studying
Estos son los
this
tipos de embarcaciones
from our
mayores que
university.
están en Chile,
Now,
wellboat,
these are the ships that we have, the well
estanques,
boats,
embarcaciones de transporte pasajero y rodado en la
passenger
proximidad de la zona sudestada,
ships,
¿ya?
as well as
Y aquí tiene
others.
una particularidad
And
porque
here,
la
what's very
IMO no está en un
specific, the
rango de hasta
IMO
5.000 AV,
establishes
pero Rosas y ahora con
a
las
range,
emisiones estamos hablando hasta 400 AV,
but we
por lo
are
tanto
looking at
hablar de
around
60,
400
de 60
AV. And
embarcaciones aumenta un
now
poco
that segment of 270 70
las
ships is
posibilidades más que pueden
increasing.
ser
We have somewhat more
pueden
ships
usar, ¿cierto?
that
En este rango
can
de
be
aplicación de
transferred to
de la
this
normativa. Las
application
embarcaciones menores no
in order
son,
to
no
control
están
these
obligadas
emissions.
a cumplir esta normativa, pero nosotros desde
Now,
lo que hacemos acá
what we do here is that we look at the new regulations and we need to try to assure that these ships do comply with these new requirements. Now, the smaller boats that are active, around 28,000, and what I was mentioning before was that size range. Now, the smaller ships, that's less than 100 AB. This is something that we have looked at in the maritime statistics. Now, these ships or vessels, they have, some of them have electric propulsion with batteries. Some of them have these conventional propulsion with the MTO, and some use a large quantity of diesel. Now, something that's very specific is that they can be connected to the ports with an onshore power supply system that has a direct impact on the contamination. And so here we have the different types of ships. This is something that Dr. De Barbieri is looking at in his research project. Here we have fishing vessels in the Biobío region and the South region, and this electric tugboat that we have here in Chile, and that's operating in the Chacabuco port. This is the only one that we have, the only electric tugboat that we have in this region. And so the rest of the numbers that they're associated to the southern zone where the aquaculture industry needs many ships to be operating in this sector. Here you can see this in numbers towards the left. Here we can see all the cabotage that are consuming diesel. This is a fishing industry, so they're generating all of these emissions that we should be controlling. And now this is the current status of the fleet. And so in order to continue with the scope of this energy transition, we need to really look at the status of the fuel that is being consumed and also understand what type of vessels that we're working with. Now, considering the strategies of the IMO from 2023 up until 2050 so that we can have that zero carbon fuels transition, just like the hydrogen and green ammonia and electrification, we have developed this transition considering 2030 as a turning point where we can also assess how we have been progressing and then whether we can reach that 2050 goal. In 2030, as Joaquín said, we have a percentage of e-fuels. We should consider them the e-methanol, the biofuels, as well as the green ammonia, green hydrogen. We have some vessels that are already using these fuels. So we are well on our way. Now in Chile this year, there's a power transition in order to reach 2030 with some projects that are using these alternative fuels. That should be a base in order to reach our objective for 2050, where we can just really focus on electrification as well as these new fuel sources. And so we have our national strategy for hydrogen, that green hydrogen use. We also have different action plans. And this year we have the naval construction plan in order to develop and reach this power transition in a concrete way. There's many projects where they're building infrastructure and vessels so that we can be ready for these new fuels. Now, within this period of transition of 2025, At the end of last year, we had some bids for some studies so that we can have a roadmap for maritime transport so that we can reach net zero. Also, the Center for Research and Development, and also projects for the reconversion of engines so that they can use methanol, for example, and also the Naval Continuity Construction Plan, as well as the Corfo Committee. All of these are actions that will allow us to reach our target in 2030 and then move on to our target of 2050. Now, looking at all the projects that we have with green ammonia and green hydrogen, we have many projects, 73 in development. But hydrogen is going to be very difficult to use in maritime transport as a fuel, as is what I'm saying. And so we considered the projects of green ammonia. We just did a small survey where we captured information with the results of different studies, and we also considered what Joaquín said beforehand. We needed to establish, according to the National Plan for Continuity, we have to look at the availability of these fuels. We need to develop hubs where we can build, repair, and reconvert these vessels that will have these fuels available, these new fuels available for the fleet that will operate there, as well as those ships that will arrive from other countries. Now, in the north, in Antofagasta, as well as the central zone in Antofagasta, Valparaíso, Santiago, Puerto Montt, from north to south, all the way to Magallanes. These are where most of our projects are for green ammonia. And the HIF project is already working with methanol. And so just considering this array of options and just working on these new changes, we have been able to talk about research and development for this new transition. Now, starting from 2019, we've really worked on just capturing information of just really identifying and researching what are the gaps and what are the problems that the national fleet is facing, as well as the challenges that the ports face. So we needed to understand the value chain of maritime transport. And we looked at technologies as well as auxiliary equipment, as well as different propulsion systems, and just review the entire fleet. And we were able to identify, according to the different profiles, those vessels that are apt to be updated, and those that can use alternative fuel, as well as move on to a system of electrification. And so we also had to consider those OPS. And we also began to review those low carbon fuels, methanol, for example, and those with a zero footprint. And we realized that we looked at the auxiliary equipments, for example, these fuel cells, so that we can focus on that transition to other fuels that have a zero carbon footprint. And we really focused on electrification. We need to electrify as much as possible. We cannot be electrified. We need to to work with these alternative fuels that
Esa es
are
la
transitionary.
transicionar. Y ahí es donde
Transition to
desarrollamos
transition, and this is
desarrollo
where
con
we
las
developed in our labs. We have a scalable lab that can simulate these hybrid and electric systems where we can look at different operational profiles, those that are going to be built, those are already built, and we can project them over time to see if they will be able to have an impact in terms of fuel use, as well as what type of emissions that they will have. And from now until 2025, and during all of this period, and considering everything that we have done, we were able to identify that the synthetic fuels, like these drop-in fuels, they are very good alternatives. So we can have this transition. That means that we don't have to have any type of replacements or changes in the motor or engine itself for it to decrease its footprint. But in some cases, we can have these reconversions. We can change these fuel converters so that they can use methanol, and also to integrate new technologies, starting with these fuels like ammonia and hydrogen, so that they can generate this propulsion. Always keeping in mind that we want to electrify as much as possible. And this is where we are looking at hybrid propulsion. We don't want to be too invasive with the current fleet, as well as electric propulsion for new vessels. Here is where we work in our lab and we do our research. We carry out simulations, as I mentioned, and we approved that we can electrify smaller fleets or smaller vessels. This is an example of what we're doing right now. Here we have a video where you can see this in movement. Here we have a tugboat. We are tugging a ship from the port that will measure the emissions. Here we can see the machine room. You can see where we're working and how we're measuring all of these parameters that will allow us to continue to work on this in the lab. So the challenges that we have is we need to have these alternative fuels available with a low carbon footprint, as well as the infrastructure for bunkering. We need to have these energy hubs, as well as the development of projects that will allow us to have these vessels that can use these new technologies. So we have to work hand in hand with new regulations, because this will allow for the use of this type of fuel for maritime transportation, as well as the development of the infrastructure for the OPS. Our challenge is electrification, and we need to work with a hybrid fleet, as well as work on transition and collaboration. So we continue to look at work in our lab, the types of fuel, type of vessels, as well as the competencies of our students and our new talent that we need to train for them to work in this industry with all of these new fuels and new technology. Now, the Green Corridor project for aquaculture is something that we're focusing on. That this associates all the value chain for the salmon industry. This is a collaboration between different stakeholders, which you see here. And this is a growing farm, a salmon farm, and they're grown up to a certain size where they will continue to a different center up until their harvesting and processing periods, up until they're shipped to the target market.
Gas should only be sent via maritime shipping. And here is the process. It may be a little technical to follow, but basically the objective is for aquaculture and for the fish farm to use renewables and generate surpluses, which will be used to generate hydrogen, which will be eventually transported and sent to other centers, productive centers, where hydrogen where the fish is transported and then sent to the process plants. We see the different companies which are part of this consortium in charge of developing this project. We are supported by the Merck's McKinney-Moller Center, which has sponsored this investigation work in Chile. This is the value chain and the group of the different companies follow this thread. We see here the sponsors of the project in the different stages of development. There's plenty of collaboration, plenty of information which is made visible, socialized in order to deploy this project. So here basically we are in the developmental phase to hopefully eventually execute this. This is an example of one of the fish farms in Chacabuco port in the south of Chile. Apart from being a green project, using different types of vessels, it also provides support to other areas, not just the fish farm, but many other isolated areas along the coastline of Chile. If I may offer you some conclusions now, just a couple concepts such as the word to transition. This word transition requires collaboration of the full value chain, including public and private sectors, as well as the civil society within the regulatory framework. It has taken some time to develop it, but still we will abide by this framework. And there are so many projects in the pipeline of projects waiting for a permit. We want to stay in this track of socializing, educating, and training. We want to train people in knowledge transfer. And well, here's how our test bench has participated along with the UH. Another point of conclusion is that energy centers will be established. This will be supported by Corfo, and they will be helping in the production of alternative fuels. So we can forecast, we can prepare forecasts aiming at year 2050 for decarbonization. We can also close investigation gaps or research work gaps which currently exist. This is one of the objectives we have set forth. This includes hard work because not all of the ships, not all of the vessels are alike. They are different, they have different systems on board. And we have to tailor our developments according to those different ships. The investigation research work will help us develop local knowledge and also develop machinery that we can probably implement and install aboard those vessels. Let me thank you for your attendance. I hope that you were able to follow my speed. In my 20 minutes time only, I will be open to questions or doubts or follow-up discussions. Happy to answer those doubts and stay in contact with you all. Thank you again. Thanks to you, Joel, for your presentation, trying to share the experience from the Southern University of Chile, Universidad Austral, and the test bench for hybrid electric marine systems, TEMS, TEMs. Part of your work is to socialize, to offer the world, offer the information to the world. On the chat, there is a parallel conversation ongoing as we speak here. You can also send your questions to the chat so we can answer them after the conference. We will as well be sharing all the presentations you saw today, including the minister's welcome words. You can participate, and we are very thankful for everyone who has joined. And the idea is hopefully not to stay here, but to continue to expand and develop this further. So I'd like to also offer the floor, or offer the chat rather, with your recommendations, conclusions, and why not taking a picture, maybe a selfie picture of the whole team. You can send that to the hashtag marine decarbonization. You will see the address on the chat. Thanks again to Joel. We have heard from Santiago, from Houston, and from Valdivia in the south of Chile. We would like to now offer the floor to Susan Ruffo from the United States, from the Ocean and Climate United Nations Foundation, with over 15 years of experience in the programs towards sustainability, preservation, and climate action. She has worked in the governments of the United States, in international organizations, in charge of different initiatives such as Circulate Initiative, the Ocean Conservancy, and Bloomberg Philanthropies, with a very strong focus on healthy oceans, circular economy, and transition towards sustainability. She also has worked at the White House as the Associate Director for Climate Preparedness, contributing to the Climate Action Plan of President Obama, and also worked for the Nature Conservancy and the Department of State at the United States. She will share with us her strategic vision about the marine shipping industry decarbonization, talking about the local and global collaboration and how to speed up this transitional process so we can understand the big objective of this debate. This is not just the effort of some actors in the market, but everybody. I will also introduce Susan in English.
This is your introduction here in English, although you might have heard it already from the great translators that we have, interpreters. But Susan Ruffo is a senior advisor at the United Nations Foundation with 15-year plus designating and implementing conservation, sustainability, and climate action policies and programs. She has served in the US government and international organizations, leading initiatives at the Circulate Initiative, the Ocean Conservancy, and the Bloomberg Philanthropies, with a strong focus on healthy oceans, the circular economy, and the transition to sustainability. Her public sector roles include Associate Director for Climate Preparedness at the White House, where she contributed to President Obama's Climate Action Plan, as well as positions at the Nature Conservancy and the U.S. Department of the United States. She joined us to share a strategic perspective on decarbonization maritime transport, highlighting how collaboration among local and global actors can accelerate the transition and align with international climate commitments. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And it's really a pleasure to be here among so many experts who are doing so much in the maritime sector. As you've heard, I've worked on ocean issues for many years, and I'm really excited to be here because Chile has always been a global champion on ocean issues, both for a sustainable future for the ocean and for people. And that leadership has really helped to move the world forward. And so, I've seen that on protecting Chilean seas and international waters. I've seen it on sustainable fisheries, and now increasingly for accelerating decarbonization in the maritime sector. We hear a lot about how the ocean needs protection and we're making, all these impacts on the ocean. And it's true, we need to be much smarter about how we use these resources. But I think that there are some of the best opportunities that we have right now in the world are coming from the ocean and ocean related sectors like shipping. And this is the moment that we should be grabbing those. We know that the maritime transport sector accounts for about 3% of global emissions, and that doesn't seem like a very big number. But when you think about the fact that that underpins about 80% or more of global trade, the potential to drive transformation across the board is enormous. The maritime sector is also unique because unlike sectors with larger emissions like buildings or agriculture, there is one global regulator for this sector, and that's the International Maritime Organization that we've been talking about. So that is a place where countries and other stakeholders can come together to really work out solutions and move forward. And that's happening. We heard about that already. Working together at the IMO, countries have set ambitious targets to reduce emissions, and they're working now to implement those targets. Now, they will have to be even more ambitious to meet the Paris climate targets and get us to net zero, but they are a really good start. And this is a really critical moment in those discussions, as we've heard, because in October, there will be decisions made about how we go forward. And Chile is already taking political leadership in those discussions and leading the way to keep that going. And that essentially is setting the stage for a ambitious, predictable, and consistent transition that shipping can actually be proactive about, as opposed to something that might be a little bit more chaotic or reactive, and losing the ability to really make that change in a positive direction. And I would say at the same time that we're making that political change, we also need action. And action is what's going to get us to those targets and beyond, while allowing us to proactively reshape this sector and the energy sector that powers the maritime sector, which I think is incredibly important for Chile. And that all needs to start today. Every country and every company has to find a role in that change so it's not just reactive. And I'm excited to be here because Chile really does have this opportunity to lead. The maritime transition, as we've already heard, requires new fuels, new sources of energy, and Chile has the potential to provide that for the globe. And we've seen you're already on that path, and have set these really ambitious targets. Chile could be one of the world's leading low-cost exporters of these green fuels. I think it's also important to say Chile's position in the South Pacific also puts it in a really strategic corner where it can be the anchor for these green corridors for these fuels across Asia and the Americas. And that drives the change globally. We're not just talking about Chile. And I think that's good for Chile's export sectors as well, because as export customers look to decarbonize their supply chains, Chile's mining and agricultural and salmon industries are going to be positioned to take advantage of some of those demands. So, obviously Chile can and should produce energy for itself, but the potential is so great that you really have an opportunity to be a leading example for how to transform these global sectors. I would say without that leadership and without the framework that we're working towards at the IMO, we risk this high level of uncertainty in the shipping industry. And that could spill over to all of these industries that rely on shipping to get to their markets. And we've already seen what that can look like for example, during disruptions like COVID. But I'm enough of an optimist to think that with this leadership and with these changes and frameworks, we can transform not just the maritime sector, but also the global energy system. And so I like to imagine this new clean energy system and new clean energy hubs that really change the energy power dynamics across the globe so that they're distributed much more evenly and not concentrated in just a few regions. Because I think ultimately, we've talked a lot about efficiency and technology, but there's much more to the transition than that. We need to talk about the people, the seafarers who run those ships. We need to talk about the people who work in ports that are moving these goods back and forth, the people who are producing those goods, the people who are the backbone of this energy economy that is growing. And I think to be successful, any transition that we talk about to a clean economy has to include all of these people. It has to include coastal communities. It has to generate quality jobs and ensure that no one is left behind. And that, I think, is the opportunity that's in front of us. International shipping, like the ocean, knows no borders, but it is guided by the decisions that we as people, we as countries make. And so Chile is in a position where there's an opportunity to show the world how to start decarbonization of this sector can be transformational, not just for shipping, but for the energy sector, the power dynamics, and it can really show how this transition can be just and equitable. And I'm excited to see Chile lead the world on this journey, and I thank you all for what you're doing to make this a reality. So thank you for having me.
Susan, that enthusiasm is just so contagious. Thank you so much. El entusiasmo de Susan se nota y se contagia. Así es que muchísimas gracias, Susan, por este relato. Por
Thank you again, Susan, for your excitement. You're very inspiring also, and you're calling us for action here. This is a great opportunity, and we want to continue to move forward and offer the floor now to Mr. Gonzalo Muñoz. Gonzalo is the United Nations High-Level Climate Champion for the COP25 summit. Maybe you have met Gonzalo. Gonzalo is also participating with other companies such as Triciclos. He is the founder of Triciclos. This is one of the pioneer circular economy companies in Chile. Maybe you have also tasted the wines that he owns from Viña Colcura, the vineyard. Also, there is another company called Ambition, and we are very thankful that Manuia has brought Gonzalo to us. He has participated in different fields. He also is participating in different networks or different entrepreneurial associations where he is playing a major role globally. We will hear about the opportunities that Latin America has, in particular Chile has, to become a leader in this industry. These initiatives are not enough for just one country to participate. We want everyone to follow the lead of the countries who are now fostering this transition. We hope that technology will help us come back from the United States down to Chile, and offer the floor now to Gonzalo Muñoz. Thank you so much, Carolina. Thank you so much for your kind words. And of course, we need to immediately pick up the words that Susan was mentioning, where she said that there is an urgency, there is a global need, and we see how Chile is positioning itself and taking concrete steps, sound steps towards this transition. We know that whenever we talk about decarbonizing the maritime sector, this is not something that is isolated from other countries. As she said, it's an ocean without limits. And we have many people from other countries overseas, and not just overseas, across the industry, the retail industry, the finance industry, the mining industry. At the end of the day, the marine sector plays a major role in the economies, and it's not just decarbonizing itself, it's decarbonizing itself and other sectors along the line in the value chain. This is also something we see in the different scopes of the economy, levels 1 and 2 and 3 in the economy, in this decarbonization process. Last year, we were very proud to see in this seminar in person in Chile, where we had people in the panel session. We had someone from Maersk and someone from Viña Concha y Toro, where we had a very interesting conversation. And this is an exporting industry, followed by the marine market. There is great coordination among, as you may see, the exporting companies and the producers in this case. This is what makes a difference in this industry. This is what Joaquín, I believe, was referring to, this transformational process. This is a great advantage, being so far apart. This is a competitive advantage when you start to work as first movers or the front runners, and Chile is a front runner in this particular area. Chile is in a transitional moment as well, in a great opportunity in this energy development boom, where our own grid is decarbonizing very quickly. We're reaching out to all of the possibilities, the development of the storage industry and the development of the electric carrier companies, such as the green fuel industry. This is very concrete in the case of green hydrogen. We have an opportunity. This is an important point. And on top of that, we know that this is a pathway which is unavoidable, it's inevitable, and Chile wants to become a supplier, a provider of solutions, also play a part in this game and participate in the exports market, not just in the internal or local market. As we heard say from the different people who have talked before me, the green hydrogen is already present in our country through pilot projects in the north of Chile. And as you may see, there is a great potential for Chile to become a great developer according to the green area corridors. And there's also the entrepreneurial world. Many companies in Chile, companies who have already solved the problem and have a very clear pathway in terms of scopes 1 and 2, now are moving faster towards scope number 3. We know how the financial industry rather in Chile is also engaged with this transition towards a complete scope 3 carbon footprint, hopefully in the medium to the long terms. We also know in Chile there are national net transition policies which are giving very clear signs. In Chile, we already have launched the NDC from Chile, which is showing how Chile will make progress towards this goal, regardless of who is in charge or who is in the administration of our country. This is a state policy. This is not really something dependent upon who is ruling our country. This is something that the country is committed to, and it has been very clearly demonstrated during this webinar session. We also need to speed up the Green Corridor pilot work for strategic routes. We've been making concrete progress with copper, for instance, and it's fascinating to see what has happened today with the salmon fisheries, the wood pulp, wines and fruit. They also must follow the same pathway when it comes to exports, but as well when it comes to replacing the so-called gray ammonia that Chile is also importing from Trinidad and Tobago, and instead start to use the green ammonia and also have greener fertilizers, among other products. We must very clearly understand that this should be clearly described in entrepreneurial goals with clear objectives. And from our institution, we are evolving towards developing the best tools for the companies to have the proper plans and to have concrete steps towards decarbonization, as well as assuring the climate financing efforts, which not just implies following a specific typology or taxonomy, but also by bringing along international cooperation and also private capital.
Chile has everything to be a wonderful lab. What we have here, this could be a wonderful example for the entire region. We also know that we need to demonstrate that with competitivity and economic development, it has to build allies. So I think that it's very clear for our country as well as the region. We don't have to wait, we need to lead. And in this case, Chile can be a wonderful leader. Thank you. Thank you, Gonzalo. Thanks very much. Very inspiring. And also, thanks for reminding us that this is urgent. We shouldn't just sit and wait for someone else to take the leadership or initiative, as Gonzalo said, and we heard this throughout this dialogue and webinar. Chile has a possibility, and it has the potential to become this hub not only of a transition to this mobility that's more sustainable, but beyond that. So this is Independence Month for us here in Chile. So let's be a wonderful patriot and not only lead next to a barbecue, but also lead with concrete actions that can really push us forward. Now, the name of this webinar is Decarbonization and Mobilization in the Maritime Sector. We need to drive this transition in Chile. I also want to tell you that what we have seen in the chat, we're going to share these presentations. So we're also going to share the recording. The idea is to not just keep the information. We want to share all of this information. We also have the invitation that through social media, you can also share this message, spread it, have the hashtag of maritime decarbonization. And those of you relate with, they should also be aware of what is happening in our country and also take advantage of these opportunities that arise. And these last couple of minutes, I want to just let you know to write down all your questions in the chat. They're going to be answered through the email communication. We've heard from technical voices, strategic voices. We have been inspired by our presentations. Now, maritime transport, this is a global effort. Now, its success depends on concrete actions that are pushed forward in the region, as well as all the commitments made by every company, every community, every port, and at the end of the day, each one of us, each person. So this dialogue is looking to just make links with different stakeholders so that we can share experiences as well as inspire and show that sustainability is not only something that we need to aspire to, but this is a reality, something that's being implemented. It's in the heart of business. And as Joaquín said, if I'm not mistaken, there's going to be fines. We don't want to have fines. We need to make changes before that. We don't want legislation to catch us, so we need to move ahead of that. This invitation is thanks to Manuia and their partners. We also want to thank Juan Carlos Muñoz, our minister, as well as Joel Pérez, Susan Ruffo, Gonzalo Muñoz, and all our speakers, because thanks to their presentations, we have been able to understand more of what is happening. We have to have the inspiration to keep going as well. We're on time, so thank you so much for being with us here today. Just to remind you that this is just part of a sequence, a whole series of conversations that will take place. The next meeting will be focused on Brazil. So this will also have an online format for those of you who want to continue to participate. The invitation has been made through Manuia's social media. You will be able to get all the info that's needed, so that invitation has been made for that as well. We need to not only share what you heard today, but we also want to capture your ideas so that Chile will be this wonderful hub and Latin America will continue to advance in the transformation of our maritime sector. Thank you to Michelle and Claudia. Thanks so much for participating. And we are thankful that language is not a barrier. And so we are making sure all messages are reached. So thanks to all of you.